If you had asked anyone in that room who I was, they would have all given you the same answer. Just a friend. And that is how I knew this had been planned. Not a slip. Not a nervous mistake. Not a man who panicked in a formal setting and said the wrong thing and would spend the car ride home apologizing. A slip happens once. What happened to me happened 5 times over 2.5 hours in a room full of 60 people who all had the same information about me. Information that my husband had been carefully, consistently, deliberately supplying them with for 3 years. Just a friend. My name is Sharon Brown. 32 years old. Black American, born and raised in Memphis, Tennessee, currently living in Seoul, South Korea, where I have built a career, a home, and a marriage that, as it turned out, only 2 of us knew about. I am an event planner. I build experiences for a living. I take a brief and a budget and an empty room, and I turn it into something that people are still talking about a year later. I understand how spaces work. I understand how people move through them and what they see and what they remember and what they walk away believing. I have been doing this since I was 25 years old, and I am very good at it, which is why I need you to understand the specific texture of what happened to me at my husband's company dinner. Because I plan events. I know exactly how much work it takes to make a room full of people all believe the same thing. I know how many decisions have to be made in advance, how many conversations have to happen before anyone walks through the door, how consistently a narrative has to be maintained to become the automatic answer in 60 different mouths. What Ju Man-young did was not an accident. It was event planning, for an event where the thing being managed was my existence. But I am getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to the beginning, because the beginning is where you will understand how a woman as sharp as me ended up standing in a hotel ballroom in Gangnam in a burnt orange dress being introduced as a friend by the man she had been married to for 3 years. The beginning is also considerably funnier than the middle. I need you to know that. I need you to laugh before I make you feel things, because that is how good stories work, and this is a good story even though it cost me something to live it. I had been in Seoul for 2 years when I met Man-young. I came at 28 with a business idea and a contact and the specific stubborn energy of a woman who had looked at her career trajectory in Memphis and decided it deserved a larger stage. My contact was B, a Korean-American woman who had been running events in Seoul for 6 years and needed a partner with my specific skill set. We had met at a conference in Atlanta, maintained the connection, and when she called me with a proposal 18 months later, I said yes before she finished the sentence. I packed what mattered and moved to Seoul with the understanding that I was betting on myself, and that bet was going to require everything I had. Seoul gave it back doubled, which is what the city does with people who come to it with genuine intention. Within 14 months, B and I had 3 major corporate accounts and a reputation that made other planners ask who did this. I was working constantly and loving it with the specific satisfaction of a person watching a bet pay off in real time. I met Man-young at one of my own events. A pharmaceutical industry networking dinner that I had planned and was managing on the night. He was a guest. Ju Pharmaceuticals was one of the larger companies in the room, and he was there representing it with the unhurried composure of a man who had been to enough of these to know exactly how much energy they required and was giving precisely that amount. I was not supposed to be talking to guests. I had a headset and a clipboard and approximately 9 things happening simultaneously. He stopped me anyway. Not rudely. He stepped slightly into my path and said in English, which caught me off guard because I had been operating entirely in Korean all evening. The floral arrangement near the east entrance is leaning. About 4 centimeters to the left. I thought you should know. I looked at him. I know, I said. I have someone on it. It will be corrected in 6 minutes. He looked at me with the expression of a man who had expected a different response and found the actual one considerably more interesting. 6 minutes, he said. 5 now, I said, and moved past him. He found me at the end of the evening while the breakdown was happening, and I was at the entrance checking off my list. 4 minutes, he said as he passed. I looked up. What? The arrangement. 4 minutes, not 6. You timed it, I said. I was curious, he said. And then he smiled. First time all evening. The kind of smile that has been being withheld and arrives with impact precisely because of the withholding. I made a note to myself to not think about that smile for the rest of the evening. I thought about it for the rest of the evening. Ju Man-young, 35, Chief Operations Officer of Ju Pharmaceuticals, a position he had held for 3 years after working through every operational level of the company his family had founded. Not the founder's son who coasted on the name. The founder's son who had apparently decided that the name required earning. Coffee the following week. Coffee became dinner. Dinner became the kind of conversation that required a second location because the first one closed. He was attentive in the specific way that is different from charm. Not performing interest, but actually having it, asking follow-up questions about things I had mentioned 2 conversations ago, retaining details with the focused precision of a man who had decided you were worth the storage space, that he made me feel like the most particular version of myself was the interesting one. Not softened, not adjusted for the room. The full, specific, occasionally too much version of Sharon Brown from Memphis who corrected floral arrangements in 4 minutes and had opinions about everything and was going to tell you those opinions whether or not you had asked. I fell in love before I had a name for what was happening. We dated for a year. He proposed at a restaurant in Mapo that I had mentioned once, offhandedly, that I wanted to try. He had remembered. He had booked it weeks in advance. The ring was not dramatic. The moment was not performed. Just him across a table saying I want to keep doing this, but officially, with the expression of a man for whom officially was the only thing missing. I said yes. And then the first argument of our engagement arrived approximately 11 days later. I am an event planner. I need you to understand what that means in the context of planning my own wedding. It means I had opinions. Specific, detailed, extensively researched opinions. I had a vision board that I had not told anyone about because I was a professional and professionals do not keep wedding vision boards before they are engaged, except that I had kept one anyway since I was 26 because I am also a human being and human beings do what they do. I wanted a real wedding. Not extravagant, I was not asking for a production, but real. A venue with natural light. Flowers I had chosen myself. A guest list of the people who had earned the right to be in the room. My mother in the front row. Be beside me. The documentation of a day that said to everyone present, "This happened, we chose each other, you were here." Man Young wanted something else. He brought it up carefully, the way he brought up things he knew I would push back on. Not directly, but from the side, the way you approach a subject you are not sure will survive a frontal approach. I was thinking, he said, one evening about 2 weeks into our engagement, that we could keep the wedding small. Very small. Just the 2 of us, maybe. A registrar. Something quiet. I looked at him over my dinner. Define quiet. Private, he said. Simple. No event. No guests. I put my fork down. Man Young. It does not have to be a production. I am an event planner, I said. I have planned 47 weddings. I have spent the last 6 years making other people's most important days beautiful and real and documented and witnessed. You are telling me that for my own wedding you want a registrar and no guests. I want it to be about us, he said. Not about performance. A wedding is not a performance, I said. A wedding is a declaration. It is saying to the people who matter to you, in front of them, with their eyes on you, this is real. This person is mine. I am choosing this publicly because I am not ashamed of it. Something moved across his face when I said that. Something I catalogued and then released because I was mid-argument and did not have the bandwidth to examine it carefully. It is not about shame, he said. It is about privacy. Privacy is for your medical records, I said. Not for the day you get married. We went back and forth on this for 3 weeks. 3 weeks of a conversation that kept returning to the same positions with slightly different language each time. He was consistent, quiet, private, just the 2 of us, in a way that in retrospect was its own kind of information. He was not negotiating toward a middle ground. He was holding a position. I eventually found what I thought was the middle ground myself. Not the wedding I had wanted, but not a registrar with no witnesses either. A small ceremony. Intentional. Be beside me. His older brother Ju Hyensu standing with him. A small gathering of people who actually loved us. My mother flying in from Memphis. A venue with natural light that I chose myself. Flowers I had final approval on. Man Young agreed to this. He agreed without the enthusiasm I had wanted from him, but with enough presence that I chose to interpret it as a man who was private by nature coming as far toward me as he could manage. I told myself that. I planned the wedding. I made it beautiful because that is what I do and because I believed it deserved to be beautiful even if the guest list was smaller than I had envisioned and the occasion was quieter than I had imagined since I was 26 with a secret vision board. The wedding was lovely. My mother cried. We gave a toast that was 3 minutes long and perfect. Manyang looked at me during the ceremony with the expression of a man who meant every word he was saying. I believed all of it. What I did not do, and I want to be honest about this because the honesty is the point of this story. What I did not do was go back to that conversation about the small wedding and sit with what it had actually told me. I had gotten enough of what I wanted, and I had filed the disagreement under things that were resolved, and I had moved forward. I should have sat with it longer, because the man who spent 3 weeks arguing for a wedding with no witnesses did not stop wanting a marriage with no witnesses when I convinced him to compromise. He just moved the invisibility somewhere I could not see as easily. If you are new here, this is Soul and Soul Stories. This is where the real ones live, the stories that are too human and too layered to fit in a caption. If this is already sitting somewhere uncomfortable in your chest, that means you are paying attention, and you should subscribe right now and drop your city in the comments. I want to know where in the world you are watching from. Memphis, Seoul, Lagos, London, Nairobi, Toronto, somewhere I have not thought of yet. Drop it. We are not even close to the middle of this story. The first year of our marriage was what I had built toward, and some things I had not anticipated. He was good at the daily things that matter more than gestures. He remembered. He showed up. He paid attention. We built a home in Songdong that I decorated with the same deliberateness I brought to every professional space because I believe that a home should feel like a choice that someone made on purpose. What I did not know was that while I was building our home and our marriage with everything I had, he was maintaining a version of his professional life that had been carefully constructed to exclude me. Not an affair. He was pretending I did not exist. 3 years of colleagues. 3 years of dinners and conferences and company gatherings. 3 years of a man who managed the operations of an entire pharmaceutical corporation, going to work every morning and maintaining, with operational precision, the fiction that he was unattached. I found out at a dinner he invited me to. Manyang told me about it on a Tuesday evening. His company was hosting a formal dinner for 60 senior staff and external partners. Hotel in Gangnam. The kind of event where spouses sometimes attended. And then he said, and I need you to hold this sentence, you should come. It would be good for you to meet some of these people. It would be good for you to meet some of these people. I said yes immediately. I was excited. I had never attended a single professional event with Manyang. Not one dinner. Not one company gathering. Not one industry function in 3 years of marriage. I had assembled explanations for this. He was private. Pharmaceutical corporate culture was formal. Spouse attendance was genuinely uncommon. He did not want to mix professional and personal. I had believed every explanation, because they were consistent. And consistent explanations from a man you love have a way of sounding like the truth, even when they are the architecture of something else entirely. I bought a new dress. Burnt orange, structured, the kind of dress that announces itself without requiring you to speak. I had my hair done. I spent the day with the anticipatory energy of someone who is about to be seen in a space where they should always have been visible. We arrived at the hotel together. His hand briefly at my back when we walked in. The first person who approached us was Jang Yeonhee, deputy director of something. Warm, professional, looking at me with the open curiosity of someone seeing a new face in a familiar room. And who is this? She asked in Korean. Manyang smiled. He put his hand briefly on my arm the way you do when you are about to introduce someone. And he said, "This is Sharon, a friend of mine." The sentence landed before I understood it. Something small and specific in the center of my chest. A door closing in a room I thought was open. A friend. Jang Yeonhee smiled at me with the warmth reserved for a colleague's friend and turned back to Manyang with a work question. And the conversation moved on, as though what had just happened was entirely ordinary. Because to everyone in that room it was. I stood beside my husband of 3 years, and I smiled, and I held my glass, and I was introduced 4 more times over the course of that evening. A friend. A friend of Manyang's. Oh, a friend from where? How nice. 5 introductions. 2.5 hours. Not once did the word wife leave his mouth. And standing in that ballroom in my burnt orange dress, something shifted in the back of my mind. Quietly. The way things shift when a memory surfaces at exactly the wrong moment. I want it to be private. Just the 2 of us. No guests. No witnesses. 3 years ago. Our engagement. The argument I had filed under resolved. It had not been resolved. It had been relocated. He had not wanted witnesses at the wedding. He had not wanted witnesses to the marriage. The registrar argument and the company dinner were the same argument. I had just been too close to the first one to see what it was actually about. I held it together for the entire dinner, with the iron composure of a woman who has spent years managing the distance between what she feels and what the room needs from her. I ate. I made conversation. I laughed at the right moments. I was a professional. Even while being professionally erased, I was a professional. We left at 10:30. The car ride home was 12 minutes. He talked about the evening, a deal moving forward, a colleague who had said something pleasing. He talked the way a man talks after a night that went well for him. I listened. I waited until we were inside, until his keys were on the counter and his tie was loosened. "Man Young," I said. He turned. "A friend," I said. The silence that followed answered everything before a word was spoken. Not confusion. Not innocence. The silence of a man who had known this moment was coming and was deciding which version of the response to use. "Yobo. Do not yobo me right now," I said. 5 times tonight. 5 different people. I am your wife. I have been your wife for 3 years. Tell me what is happening." He said, "It is complicated at work right now." I looked at him for a long time. "You wanted a secret wedding," I said. He went very still. "You argued for 3 weeks for a wedding with no witnesses," I said. "I thought I had won that argument. I thought we had found a compromise. But you were not arguing about the wedding, were you? You were telling me something about how you intended to manage this marriage from the outside. And I was so busy planning the day that I did not hear what you were actually saying." Man Young looked at me across our kitchen and said nothing, which was the most honest thing he had said all evening. "How long have your colleagues believed you are not married?" I said. The pause was its own answer. "Since before we got married," he said. "Since before we got married. Before I had argued with him for 3 weeks about witnesses. Before I had planned a ceremony I made beautiful because I believed it deserved to be beautiful. Before I had stood in a venue with natural light and flowers I had final approval on and said vows in front of the small gathering of people I had fought for. He had already decided who would not be in that gathering. 60 people in a hotel ballroom in Gangnam. I put my glass on the counter. Very carefully. "Guest room tonight," I said. "Because the conversation that needs to happen next cannot happen in the state I am currently in." He went. I stood in my kitchen and I called B. She arrived in 22 minutes. She sat across from me and I told her everything. The dinner. The 5 introductions. And then the part 1 had just connected. "The wedding argument," I said. "He wanted no witnesses." B. "He wanted no witnesses." B was very still for a moment. "And you talked him into a small ceremony," she said. "I thought I had won," I said. "You moved the boundary," she said quietly. "And he accepted the move because a small private ceremony with 12 people was closer to invisible than what you actually wanted. And then he took the invisibility to work and kept it there." I sat with that. Then she said, "This is not the first thing that did not add up." "What do you mean?" I said. "In 3 years he has come to exactly 1 event connected to your work," she said. "He was late. He left early. He introduced himself to my clients by his first name only." I went very still. "No family name," he said. "No title. Just Man Young." He had not only been erasing me from his world. He had been carefully managing what I could see of him in mine. The invisibility had been running in both directions. I did not sleep. Not because I was crying. The grief had not arrived yet. The understanding was still completing itself. But because my mind was doing the exhausting work of reviewing 3 years through a lens I had not been using. Every work event I had not attended. Every gentle explanation I had accepted. Every time I had told myself he was private by nature, and that was simply who he was. Private by nature. He was not private by nature. He was strategic by practice. Those are not the same thing, and I had spent 3 years confusing one for the other, because the man I loved and the man who was managing my visibility had the same face and the same voice, and I had not known to look for the difference. At 5:30 I got up and made coffee and sat at my kitchen table with a notepad. I write things down when I need to think in structure rather than in circles. I wrote what I knew, what I did not know, what I needed to find out, and at the bottom of the page I wrote 1 sentence. He told me who he was during the wedding argument. I just did not listen. Man Young came out of the guest room at 7. He looked like a man who had also not slept. He poured coffee, sat across from me at the table. I let him sit. I did not speak first. I had prepared for this the way I prepared for a difficult client meeting, knowing what I needed, knowing what I was not going to accept, waiting for the other person to show me what they had before I showed them what I knew. I owe you an explanation, he said. You owe me several, I said. Start with the wedding. He looked up from his cup. Not the company dinner, I said. The wedding. 3 weeks you argued for no witnesses. Tell me what that was actually about. He was quiet for a moment. The specific quiet of a man being asked to account for something he had hoped would not be connected to something else. It was the same thing, he said. The board. The expectations. I had already started managing it at work, before we were even engaged. And he stopped. I thought if the wedding was small enough, private enough, it would give me more time to manage the disclosure at the company on my own timeline. Your own timeline, I said. Yes. Meaning you were always planning to tell them, I said. Eventually. On a timeline you controlled. Yes, he said. And that timeline was 3 years and counting, I said. He did not answer. Man Young, I said. I argued with you for 3 weeks about our wedding because I believed a wedding should have witnesses. Because I am an event planner who has spent her career making days like that real and documented and witnessed for other people. Because I believe that choosing someone publicly is part of choosing them. I fought for 12 people in a room. And you agreed because 12 was closer to 0 than what I actually wanted, and you thought you could manage the rest. Yes, he said quietly. Just that. No defense. And I planned that wedding, I said. I made it beautiful. I convinced myself that the size did not matter, and that the day was real, and that the people in the room were what counted. And all of that was true. But I also talked myself out of understanding why you had wanted 0 witnesses. I filed it under compromise and moved on, and I should not have moved on. I should have sat with it until I understood what you were telling me. You could not have known. I had information, I said. I chose not to examine it. That is on me. What you did with the information you had is on you. Both things are true. Manyang looked at me with the expression of a man encountering a level of honesty he had not expected and did not know how to receive. Why? I said. Not the board. Not the timeline. Why, at the most fundamental level, did you think this was manageable? That a person could have a wife and a professional life and keep them in separate rooms indefinitely. He was quiet for a long time. Because I had been compartmentalizing since I took the role, he said. My father's expectations. The board's expectations. What the Jew name was supposed to look like. I had been putting things in separate rooms my whole professional life, and it had worked. I thought I could do the same thing with us. He paused. I did not understand that a marriage is not something you can put in a room and close the door on. I understand that now. Now, I said. Now, he said. Too late. I know. I looked at him across the table for a long moment. I need you to hear something, I said. The wedding argument was the first time you told me who you were under pressure. And I did not listen. I am not saying that to excuse what you did. I am saying it because I need you to understand that I am a woman who examines evidence, and I missed this one. And I will not miss it again. Which means that whatever happens next between us, the compartmentalization is finished. All of it. Permanently. Not managed down. Finished. Managed down. Finished. Yes, he said. I mean it, I said. There is no version of what comes next where I am in a separate room from any part of your life. Not professionally. Not with your family. Not with anyone who matters to you. I am in every room, or I am in none of them. That is the only offer available. Yes, he said again. And then, that is the offer I should have made you 3 years ago. Here is what I want to say to anyone watching this who has ever accepted a compromise that felt like a win but left something quiet and unresolved sitting at the back of your mind. That quiet thing is not nothing. That quiet thing is information. People tell you who they are. Not always in the big obvious moments. Sometimes in the small negotiations. In the things they argue for quietly and persistently. In the boundaries they push gently enough that it feels like discussion rather than establishment. Pay attention to what someone consistently moves toward even when you push back. That is who they are when the stakes get higher. Now, Manyang begged. That afternoon I had spent the morning at BA's office. Not working. Just being somewhere that was not our apartment. Having the kind of conversation that required 3 cups of tea and mostly silence. I came home and he was in the living room. He had not gone to work. In 3 years of marriage, Manyang had never not gone to work. He was sitting on the couch. Not his end. The middle. Waiting without settling. That told me something. He stood when I came in. I called the office, he said. I told them I was not coming in. I told them why. I stopped. You told them why. I called Jang Yonhee, he said. I told her the woman I introduced as a friend last night is my wife. I told her I had been wrong to introduce you that way. Wrong to maintain that pretense for 3 years. I told her I wanted to correct it immediately and completely. I looked at him. I also called the board liaison, he said. And my father. You called your father. I told him I should have done this 3 years ago, and that I was doing it now, and that if there were consequences for my position, I would manage them. But I was not going to continue managing this situation at my wife's expense. I sat down. He crouched down in front of me, below my eye level, which was deliberate and which cost him something in the specific way that deliberate vulnerability costs a person who does not practice it. I know this does not give back 3 years, he said. I know it does not undo the wedding argument or the company dinner or every event in between. But I need you to know I am not choosing the role over you. I am making that choice now, in front of everyone, and I will live with whatever it costs me professionally. He paused. And I need you to know something else. I waited. I went back and looked at our wedding photographs this morning, he said. All of them. The 12 people in that room. Your mother in the front row. BA's toast. The flowers you had final approval on. He stopped. It was the most real day of my life. And I almost did not let it happen because I was afraid of a board of people who were not even in the room. I looked at him on the floor of our living room in Songdong. This man who had timed a floral arrangement at 4 minutes instead of 6. This man who had booked a restaurant I mentioned once, weeks before I remembered mentioning it. This man who had been afraid in the most human, most costly way, and had handled that fear badly from the very first argument of our engagement, and was now sitting on the floor of his own living room trying to account for all of it. Get up, I said. He got up. Sit down, I said. He sat beside me. Not at his end. The phone calls do not fix this, I said. 3 years of being someone's secret does not dissolve in a morning. And the wedding argument does not dissolve either. That one has been sitting unexamined for 3 years, and it needs to be examined properly. With someone who can help us do it correctly. Yes, he said. And Man Young, I said. He looked at me. If you ever introduce me as a friend again, I said, in any room, to any person, for any reason, I will introduce myself. Very loudly, with my full name and our wedding date, and the exact number of years we have been married. And I will also mention that I am an event planner, and that I plan the wedding myself. Are we clear? The corner of his mouth moved. First time since before the dinner. Very clear, he said. Good, I said. We went to counseling. A therapist in Mapo with experience in international couples, and the specific gift of asking the question neither of you wanted to answer. The wedding argument came up in the second session. Manyoung talked about it in a way he had never talked about it during the actual argument. Not managing toward a conclusion, but just saying what had been true for him at the time. I talked about what I had suppressed when I filed it under compromise and moved on. It was uncomfortable and necessary, and there were sessions I sat in the car for 10 minutes afterward before I could go inside. There were also sessions where something shifted, where the man across from me stopped compartmentalizing long enough to be fully in the room, where I stopped being the event planner managing the outcome and just said what was true. Those sessions were harder and more useful than all the others. The board. 2 members had opinions. Those opinions were expressed and then set aside when Manyoung's operational results made the conversation brief. His father called me directly. In careful English, he said he was sorry for how things had been managed and that he hoped I understood his son was a better man than his decisions in this matter had shown. I told him I was still deciding that. He laughed. Then he said, "My son chose well. I should have told him years ago that we could manage whatever came with that choice. 24 hours after the resolution. So you are staying." "I am staying," I said. "Because he called Jang Yonhee. Because he sat in the middle of the couch," I said, and looked at the wedding photographs, and crouched on the floor, and called his father, and chose me in front of the people he had been afraid of for 3 years. I paused, and because the wedding argument told me who he was under pressure, and the morning after the dinner told me who he chose to be when the pressure became unbearable. Both things are data. You used the word data about your marriage again, B said. I am an event planner, I said. Everything is data. She laughed. I laughed. The specific relief of something held too long finally being set down. I attended the next company function. Deep green this time. My better color. B had been telling me for years. Manyoung walked in with his hand at my back, and when the first person approached he said, before they could ask. This is my wife. Sharon. My wife Sharon. 4 words. The simplest sentence. The one he had argued against for 3 weeks during our engagement and had been afraid of for 3 years at work, and which turned out, when he finally said it, to require nothing more than breath and intention and the decision to stop managing the room. I shook the person's hand. I smiled. Sharon Brown. Event planner. Wife of 3 years. Memphis, Tennessee. Seoul, South Korea. Present. Visible. Named correctly. That is Seoul and Seoul Stories, and if you have been here this whole time and you are not subscribed yet, I need you to fix that right now because we are building something real on this channel, and every story that comes next is going to be worth your time. Subscribe. Drop your city in the comments. Tell me where in the world this one found you. And to every person who has ever been someone's private truth while the rest of the world was given a different story. You did not lose your marriage that night. You lost proof that it had ever existed. And then you decided that was not going to be the ending.